Hello, BookTube. I was watching Sarah's channel this morning, Sarah the Bookish Knitter. Oddest thing, everybody I know connected with BookTube, whether they make videos or just watch lots of videos, everybody I know watches Sarah's channel. Just routinely refer to it. What did Sarah talk about? What did Sarah do? Well, that sort of thing. Did you see the cat footage of Sarah's latest video? And yet she doesn't have 20,000 subscribers. What's going on there? But I watched a video that she made this morning where she just did egregious additions to an already overburdened TBR. Just, here are a few more books that I may or may not get to. And I love the idea. So I am doing that for this video. I'm doing an add-on to my TBR for whenever that TBR is, this weekend, this week, or certainly the month of November. Maybe December. Some of these are December releases that I have advanced copies for or really want finished copies for. This first one is a comic book collection, and I believe it's a reissue. I could be wrong about that. This is the Brood Saga, X-Men Epic Collection, the Brood Saga. This involves the Marvel superhero team, the X-Men, or a collection of mutants. The story is written by Chris Claremont at his most verbose. We're talking paragraph-long thought balloons, whole pages that are barely interspersed with any kind of movement on the page. They're just prose. And artwork by Dave Cockrum, not at his best, and the comic book artist Paul Smith, who's always really, really good. And this involves the X-Men fighting essentially the aliens from the Aliens movies. Essentially that. The Brood are an alien species. They have been used intermittently in the X-Men comics. They can impregnate you with their young. They have all sorts of gross, icky biological adaptations that make them formidable to fight. And there's all sorts of high science fiction here. I mean, yes, Chris Claremont is overwriting this thing, but it's still terrific. Just terrific. It really underscores an element of the X-Men that was shown all the way back in the 1960s, which is how well the X-Men mesh with a pure science fiction plot. The original plot of the Sentinels, the mutant hunting robots, is pure science fiction. And this is much the same way. The only problem with this, I mean, as you X-Men fans will be able to tell from this cover, that character there wielding the rip-off lightsaber is not an X-Man. That is Lilandra, Empress of the Shi'ar Empire. She's not a mutant. She's just a warrior empress and girlfriend of Professor X for a while there. That is an indication that this cast expands and expands and expands. It also includes Carol Danvers, who is now Marvel's Captain Marvel, but here she's given Silver Surfer level powers very briefly, and I imagine she has those again in her own comic. She's getting a first issue soon. Captain Marvel #1, the 11th, 12th, maybe 17th Captain Marvel #1 in the last 10 years because people don't buy her books, and Marvel will not accept that. They will not accept that. They have told the fans, you will love this character. This is going to be a viral breakout character. This is going to be Spider-Man from the 60s. This is going to be the X-Men from the 70s. You don't get to call that. You don't get to tell your fans who they're going to make into that character. You don't get to call the next Deadpool or the next Venom. You have to make it that way by creating good stuff. And you don't do that with the Carol Danvers Miss Marvel. You don't, Captain Marvel. You don't do that at all, which is why she's having a first issue soon. She's had 10 first issues in the last 10 years. This one isn't going to sell at all anyway, either, because this is comic book based on hatred of the fans, and the fans know that now. My God, they might not have been wise to that 10 years ago, but they certainly know it now. But she's in this, in an interesting plot development, and so are a lot of other people in here. This is overwritten, but it's terrific science fiction, high concept science fiction, a lot of it. As you can tell from the Brood and also the lightsaber, Chris Claremont doesn't really have all that much originality in his writing DNA, and you won't find much in these stories. There are ideas ripped off from 10 different kinds of pulp science fiction. But it's enjoyable. I think this is a reprint. Marvel Epic Collections of the X-Men tend to do well. They tend to sell out to collectors, so they only make so many of them, and they'll show up. One of them will show up at your comic shop, and then it'll be gone, and you won't be able to get it again except in secondhand markets for a markup. So I'm not 100% sure one way or another, but it'll be enjoyable to revisit these storylines, definitely. Then we have a natural history book by Joe Roman. This is called Eat, Poop, Die: How Animals Make Our World. And I imagine this is going to be about the cycle of life, which is adumbrated on the cover. Once a horrible spoiler for all of you young people out there. Once you reach a certain age, this describes your day every day. Maybe you're a long way off from that, so you probably don't believe me. But this will be, I think you can tell, a kind of irreverent journey through, hey, did you know that? Quirky details of natural history. There could be more to this than that. There could be more to it. But that's all I'm going to go in expecting, definitely. And then we have a book by Walter Scherer. This is called A History of Fake Things on the Internet with a Shattered Cell Phone. Perfect minimalist cover design. This is a study of falsity on the internet, and I'm hoping that it goes a lot further than just wearing and hand-wringing about AI. I'm hoping that it does that, because there's a lot more fake stuff on the internet than just deep fakes or AI. A lot more. As I've mentioned in a couple of videos, I believe that the number one fake thing on the internet is you and me. Maybe not in our specific case. I'm pretty genuine on this channel. But social media especially, not just the internet, but social media especially, has taught an entire generation of people that what matters is not the truth, but the brand. And the brand is infinitely manipulable. As long as you silence or buy the people who can contradict it, or just call it the cancellation cycle. So if you're Logan Paul and you destroy a whole community, make a whole community of people who really can't afford it, move out of their community because you've destroyed the whole thing. Non-stop, incredibly loud parties, non-stop drug dealing, non-stop property damage, and non-stop indifferent from the police whose union you have bought. If you're Logan Paul and you do that, and someone who's not touchable by you calls you on that, there are a couple of internet troll watch channels that do a really good job of that, and they're not really touchable. If someone does that, then you just sigh and you go the rounds and you say that you've done the cancellation cycle. And all of it is fake. All of it is fake. The outrage of the families is not fake. The suffering of the families that Logan and Jake Paul cause every day is not fake. The suffering of the individual people in their orbit, including the women who are their slaves, their suffering is real. But everything the rest about it is fake. They don't have a thought in their head. Every great deal that they offer their fans, whether it's cents or NFTs or whatever, is all fake. All of it is fake. All of the ideas they had, all of the houses that they've shown, all the people, the crew, all of that. It's all fake. So it's not just AI, and it's also not just mega celebrities. Logan and Jake Paul, I hope, will end their lives in jail. But right now, they're staggeringly wealthy, both of them. But I'm talking about anybody online. I'm talking especially about your teenager, if you have one. They have become incredibly adept at lying about themselves in order to produce a three-dimensional image for the internet. They've become incredibly good at doing that, better than any generation has ever even thought of being. 2 generations ago, the only people who even thought about brand management were Hollywood stars. Now, no, now not at all. Now, your 15-year-old has a brand. They have a persona. If they're online, they have a persona. That persona will have almost no contact points with actual reality. They know to clean that image. They know to contour it to exactly what they want it to be for online. That is true whether they're an influencer or not. I would argue that if you are a parent in your mid-40s and you have kids who are in their teens, they might be influencers and you might not know it. They value their online freedom, and you are in a legal position to contour that, and they're not going to like that at all. But this is the point that I always make about, well, you name it. You just name it. The kid-friendly channels, there are tons and tons of kid-friendly channels. They hate children. Absolutely hate them. The travel channels, the gnarly bros who get in their redone camper van and drive out in the middle of the Kenai Peninsula to go through a blizzard, and they've got all of the fetishistic elements involved. They have to show themselves tramping around the outside of their cabin in boots. They have to show themselves preparing and eating an elaborate meal. For some reason, cooking a meal in that converted camper van is a big part of the fetish that drives those channels. I have no idea why. Haven't figured that out yet. Must make the place stink. But then again, the whole thing is a lie. They're driving to that remote Kenai Peninsula parking lot to go through a 20-inch snowstorm only on film. That's just the brand that's doing that. In reality, they have a backup vehicle full of a film crew. And they're filming the appropriate parts of their footage, and then they're going home to sleep in their bed. Of course, they're not going to risk a blizzard. Of course, they're not going to do that. Same thing with minimalists. I've been saying this for years. They have an apartment across town that looks like yours. It looks like mine. They don't live in that austere white space with one dying cactus. No, they don't. And let's not even talk about, although I love to talk about tobacco addiction, it's absolutely rampant. And it is carefully, very carefully scrubbed out of most internet presentations. The only people who tend to show it are the people who tend to flaunt it. Like, for instance, the men's rights guys or streamers who will often flaunt the fact that they are constantly inhaling carcinogens, constantly, throughout 3 or 4 hours of nonstop screaming. Just amazing for me to think of the damage they're doing to themselves. If I cared at all that these lying pieces of crap were going to have a horrible age 50, then I'd be emailing them every day, begging with them to stop, get help, try to get into some sort of drug addiction program. But instead, their fans get off on it, but they're the only ones. All the others lie about it. All of them lie about it. The friendly, goofy channels, the hey, did you ever notice channels, especially the fitness influencers, all of them are roasting tobacco addicts, and they scrub that from the internet. I'm hoping that this book gets into that subject. Not just the health influencers, not just the himbos with the huge chests, but that aspect of fake things online is that you can fake everything online. If you want to, you can. That classic New Yorker cartoon on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. When that ran in the New Yorker 10 years ago, nobody had any idea how prophetic it would be. I'm hoping that this does the subject justice. Unfortunately, with some internet books, studies of the internet, what it is, what it's doing to all of our lives, this thing that's in all of our lives, a lot of them just don't do the subject justice. At heart, don't take it seriously. And that is bad news. That's a shame, because it's an incredibly important subject. I've read probably 200 books on one or another social aspect of the internet. I've read probably 2 that were any good, any good at all. Most of them are brand management. Most of them are lying. You'll have someone saying, here are the 10 reasons why you should delete all your social media accounts right now. Person has 30 social media accounts, is on them all day long, every day. Person write a best-selling book about digital minimalism, does not observe any of the precepts in that book, and so on and so forth. Person will write a book on digital decluttering. They absolutely do not do it. The book is just part of the brand. So I would like it if this were taken seriously. We'll see if it is. Then this next one is by A.J. Black. I know this will be taken seriously because it's a Trekkie, and Trekkies take their religion very seriously. This is called Lost Federations, and it is a history of all the paths not taken in Star Trek over the last 60 years. All of the shows that were brooded about, all of the movies that were almost made, all of the continuations or spin-offs that were almost made. There'll be quite a few of them in here that a Star Trek fan will be familiar with. Star Trek fans are all familiar with Phase 2, for instance. But there'll be stuff in here that isn't, I bet. This author is taking the subject seriously. So you Star Trek fans out there, fans not only of watching the show, but of reading it and reading about it, this is the year's only must-buy, right? It's the only one. Aside from maybe Patrick Stewart's memoir. I guess you Next Generation fans are probably going to want to read that. But you're definitely going to want to read this. I would think. Unless this drastically surprises me by being bad, which I really, really do. I really do not think it will be. Then we have a book by Ed Conway. This is called Material World: The 6 Raw Materials That Shape Modern Civilization. Now, this cover is washing out a little, so you can't really see that he actually identifies those materials on the cover. Let's see what they are. Salt, lithium, copper, oil, sand, and iron. And you would know from this book, if lithium weren't on this cover, you could just throw it away. It means the author doesn't know what he's talking about. But those 6 items, I would be hard-pressed to come up with a 7th, and I would be impossible to take any one of those off there. There's only one that's missing from that 6. One material, I guess you could call it a material. I don't know, maybe the author has a definition here that would exclude it. There's one that's more important than any of these. And it's going to be even more important as the 21st century progresses. And that's water. It's far more important than any of the rest of these, because I know we have a lot of other things to think about. We have a lot of other things to talk about, a lot of other items in the news. But if you look for it in the news, whether you're talking about Antarctica or Africa or especially America, huge bodies of potable water are disappearing at massive rates, so that someone just vacationing for 15 years can see it, let alone someone who's lived on the shores of whatever for 70 years. Potable water seems to be disappearing from the surface of the earth. That's not anything that anybody really expected, but it is definitely happening. Long stretches of the Mississippi River, for instance, America's mighty Mississippi River, stretches of the Mississippi River require portage for stretches of every year now. There are parts of the Mississippi that you can't take even a flat-bottom boat down. And the Mississippi's not all that potable. I'm talking about other things here. Aquifers seem to be drying up. But maybe this author is saying, raw materials, and maybe this author almost certainly knows that, so I imagine there's a reason why water's not on this list. But I like the cut of the rest of it. Of course, a book that promises disquisitions on sand or salt obviously is going to heavily rely on the author's writing ability. I don't think I've ever read Ed Conway. It could be that this book is tooth-grindingly boring. We shall see. It certainly is setting it up for that. Then we have a book by Alexandra Lang. I read this last year, and I'm going to read the reissue. This TBR, this addition to my TBR, will have reads and rereads. And this is Meet Me by the Fountain. And this is a history of the mall, of the shopping mall. I think I talked to you about this last year and praised it. I really enjoyed it. I really thought it was good. Exactly the same thing that I was talking about with the history of fake things on the internet. It's these subjects are right in front of you. The whole point of this, well, it's the point I've been making on this channel all along. The whole point of this is not the originality of the subject. The whole point of this is execution. The whole point of anything is execution. And this is really well done. It's done with a lot of energy. And it reminded me a lot of a study that I read, a nonfiction book that I read from, I think, a university press long before we were talking to each other, about walking in public. The author took that subject, walking in public, and knocked it out of the park. Oh my God, I wish I could remember the name of that book. These studies tend to come and go. They never show up in used bookstores. I wish I could remember the name of that walking book, but oh my God, not only was it fascinatingly written, but it opened my eyes to a whole bunch of things that I did not think about at all. And so did this book. Like most of you, I have spent my share of time in shopping malls. And when you do that, when you go to the mall with your friends in the 80s, you go to the mall with your friends in the 70s, you go to the mall with your friends in the 90s, you think, okay, well, I spend hours every week in the mall. Surely I understand them. There's so much more going on. This book delves into it so wonderfully. Oh my. Then we have an old Regency romance that I haven't read in, 10 years, something like that. I'm going to give it another try. It's a modern Regency romance. It's My Darling Caroline by Adele Ashworth. And that cover is a clear indication of how you know this is a modern Regency romance. I am a big fan of the old Signet Regency romances, old category romances that were, they emphasized the wit and the repartee of the characters. They emphasize the awkward social situations and the heartbreak and whatnot. But there was none of this. There was no naked people pawing all over each other like last week's leftovers. And the new Regency romances are technically set in the same time period. They don't usually have anywhere near the same amount of historical research that went into the old ones that I love. And they are full of hanky-panky right from the beginning. You'll be hard-pressed in one of these things to get out of chapter 2 without lingerie going missing. You just have to prepare yourself for that. I still think that the reason that I love them almost as much as I love the old-style Signet Regency romances is because they retain the one essential quality of those older Regencies, which is playfulness. I value that more than anything in romances. I like the fact that romances have staked out the last territory where you can have fun with a book and get a happy ending. And I remember liking this book, but it's been a while, so we'll see. A lot of romance has gone out of the bridge since then. Then we'll deal with an Oxford Handbook. We've seen some Oxford handbooks on this channel over the years. I have a couple of them in this room. They are oddities, first of all. They're not distributed popularly, but they're not text. They're not textbooks either. I honestly don't know where Oxford makes back their money, even a little money from these things. They're big, oversized hardcovers, and they're anthologies of the latest research and writing on a particular subject. And there are now hundreds of them. Absolutely hundreds of them. I have, I think, 2 on Edmund Spencer. They did an excellent volume on animal ethics, the Oxford Handbook of Animal Ethics. Just wonderful. Of course, with any anthology, you're going to get some people that don't belong there. You're going to get some boring writing. But it's amazing how free these things generally are of that. I don't remember how many volumes there are on Shakespeare. I have 1 on Shakespeare. And I do go back to them. Because they're anthologies, they are infinitely revisitable. And they have one coming out. I actually thought the line had ended. I don't know why I thought that. But their new one is the Oxford Handbook of Christmas. This will be a big thing. This will be 800 pages at least. It'll be a big hardcover. Unfortunately, they're pricey if you were to buy one. Here's hoping that you're swimming in extra money. If you are, you might not want the one on Christmas, but I guarantee you, if you look at their list, you'll find one on a subject that you want. And this will deal with everything, with Christmas all over the world, with the history of Christmas. I'm hoping that I'm hoping that my boy, Prince Albert, shows up in here quite a bit. That would be only fitting. There should at least be a few whole essays in here on Victorian Christmas. And maybe even one on Regency Christmas. We'll see. And the modern era, obviously, as you can see there. So, Christmas doesn't really do much for me. I'm not really a Christmas person. I don't, to invoke Charles Dickens, I don't really keep Christmas in my heart unless I'm visiting. If I'm visiting, for instance, when the Bean and I visited the Richardson family up in Vermont, for Christmas, it was absolutely magical. We were welcome at a warm table full of wonderful food. Both of us were at the table. That was wonderful. But usually not. Usually it's not. There are only 2 holidays on the calendar that I care about, and it's not one of them. But then this next one is by Barbara Berman, and I have real hopes for it. It is going to be an entree into a world I know nothing about, and that at least will make it interesting. I'm, again, hoping about the execution. This is called The Point of the Needle, Why Sewing Matters. A wonderful double entendre there in the title. This is about sewing. It's not a manual of how to sew. It's not a collection of patterns or whatever sewers use. Instead, it's about sewing. What it means. What it means to the people who do it. When they do it. Why they do it. And what kind of people do it. And that is fascinating to me. I am not a sewer. I do not have much of a sense of touch. Don't think I would ever take it up at age 28. I don't think I will ever be taking this up as a hobby. But I'm fascinated to know about it. I've known a lot of sewers in my life. A lot of people who really, I mean, you may be one of them yourself. A lot of the sewers that I've known in my life really didn't want to get through a day without it. It wasn't just, since I'm not a sewer, I automatically think of it as a very pragmatic thing. You only sew when you have a reason to do it. If there's something ripped or torn, then you need to fix that. You're mending. And I know from the sewers that I've met over my 28 years that is not true for a lot of them. A lot of them, it is not simple pragmatism. They need to do it every day. It does something for them. And that all sounds promising. And that is the kind of book I'm hoping this is. If it's that kind of book, I will be singing its praises. I'm sure I will be. The only doubt comes in with the execution. Because if Barbara Berman says that the point of the needle is to puncture the patriarchy, if my name, by name, comes up in the index of this book, Donoghue, Steve, if men come up in here as the villain, when a lot of sewers that I know are men, if men come up in here as the villain of the piece, well, it's going to work my one good nerve, because I've already had it up to here with 4 books in the last month doing that. Fraudulently. That would be fraudulent. It's saying that that sewing is the ultimate act of resistance against the patriarchy, well, I'm not going to like this then. I'm not going to like that. I don't know if the social moment of that stupid SJW fad has spent its course, but I want it to be over. I'm now officially sick of it. It's fraudulent. It always was fraudulent. And I really don't want to read any more books that tell me that all witchcraft persecutions in all of European history were femicide. That is not what the sources that you're studying say. In Europe or in America, that is not what the sources you're studying say. That is you wanting attention. So I'm ranting ahead of time, and I'm not ranting against this book because I haven't read it yet. We'll see. We'll see. I admit I'm a little touchy on the subject. I admit my hackles will be up just a bit. But I'll know in very little time. I won't. The authors who have that kind of a fraudulent point in mind, they can't keep their powder dry. They wish this. If Barbara Berman if that's her reason for writing this book, I'll know it in the first chapter. I'm hoping that it's not. I'm hoping that it's a really engaged, interesting study of this practice that I know nothing about. I've never experienced it. I never will experience it. I only know it secondhand. I know the kind of devotion that it can elicit in the people who do it. I'd love a book about that. We will see. Then we have natural history, I guess you could call it. This is by Ron McGill and Greg Coate, and it's called The Pride of a Lion. The subtitle is Quasi's Story, and the sub-subtitle is What the Animal Kingdom Can Teach Us About Survival, Fear, and Family. So much like Eat, Poop, Die, I'm worried about this book. I'm as a natural history of lions, okay. I'm okay. I would be okay with that. A cat that's the size of your sofa and has 6-inch long claws and it weighs 300 pounds and is a dyed-in-the-wool, card-carrying, dew-paying carnivore, that's of course going to give me the willies just a bit. But if this is a natural history and also maybe a little bit of Born Free thrown in, I guess Quasi is a lion cub. If that's the combination that I get here, natural history and a little bit of personal history with one particular lion cub, fine. It's the subtitle that bothers me. What the animal kingdom can teach us about survival, fear, and family. That sounds jury-rigged. That sounds like it's going to be special pleading. If you're going to learn life lessons about child rearing from lions, then that means that if you're a man and you marry a woman who is divorced or widowed, the first thing you should do before repeatedly pleasuring her without her permission, before you even do that, the first thing you should do is kill and eat her children from the first marriage. And I don't think that's a life lesson about friends and family and resilience and down with the patriarchy that anybody wants. And that is the truth with lions. So is this going to be, Disney-style anthropomorphizing, or is it going to be actual lions? Is it going to teach from nature, or from, you've really got a lion inside you? That's Hackles Up. But then Hackles Up is not a condemnation of a book. Hackles Up is the standard natural default setting of a critic. There are a lot of ways that this book could insult my intelligence. There are a lot of ways that it could insult its subject. My hackles went up. My antenna go up when you mention lessons about family in a book about lions. Lion family life for a cub is not anywhere near as loving and forgiving as human family life. So is this author just thinking, yeah, humans are the worst. We could learn so much from the animals, man. Well, I've read those books before, and they're uniformly dumb. So we will see. Then this next book I am in the middle of rereading. I read it when it came out. I loved it. It was weirdly spellbinding. It featured high on my my storied Steve Reads end of the year list. And I recently found a big, heavy hardcover of it, and I have been picking and pecking my way through it in preparation for Dr. November, which happens in November. It's a new BookTube event starting in just a day, where myself and a few other co-hosts are going to lead an event concentrating on espionage fiction, spy fiction, secret agent fiction. Lots and lots of fun. There's tons of stuff out there. And this book automatically came to mind because Dr. November is taking place also during Nonfiction November, an older BookTube event that's all about nonfiction. And that is this. That is Private Spy, The Letters of John le Carré, the author of Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy, and The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, which is our group read for Dr. November. I got a copy of this when it first came out a couple of years ago and really liked it. No idea what happened to my copy. I'm guessing that I sent it to somebody. And then I found a copy just recently, a hardcover copy. It's a big brick of a thing. And I have been making my way through it with utter fascination this second time through, just tracing all sorts of themes, course, the themes aren't conscious because they're bred into the DNA of the letter writer. They aren't anything the letter writer is consciously summoning. And they are fascinating throughout here. The dry sense of humor, but also other things that start to go on once Le Carré is famous. Some letters that he writes to some people start to become little melodramas on their own that don't seem grounded in reality. It seems like a weird meta-creative exercise with just the right recipients. It's amazing to me. Tim Cornwell is, I believe, John Le Carré's son, one of his sons. It's amazing to me the job that is done with this book, editorial-wise. The apparatus to make sure that you're not in the dark is wonderfully complete without being intrusive. And its completeness underscores all the more when things are happening in the letters once Le Carré becomes famous. Things start to happen in a letter for which there is no explanation, for which no one could give an explanation. Maybe even Le Carré himself could not have given an explanation. And that introduces an element that runs throughout the rest of the book that is just fascinating. I'll be reading in between and in addition to other actual spy novels, including quite a bit by Le Carré. I might just reread everything, all the novels of Le Carré in November. I might just do that. I thought I'd be able to stop at just The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, but I've read a couple since then as well. In addition to that, I'll be reading lots of other novels by a lot of other people, but this will be right at my side the whole of the month. So that's definitely part of the TBR. It's not over and done with yet. And then we'll finish up with another romance, and this is a Harlequin category romance. Because in Sarah's video, I'll leave a link to her video. I'll try to remember to leave a link to her video. And also, it's pointless to do so because every time I leave a link to a video, I get 10 people saying right away, the link doesn't work. I guess I don't know how to link a video on YouTube. I once upon a time did. I guess YouTube has changed that. So there's that @ symbol involved now, something, or I have to link someone's TikTok or whatever. I'll try to leave a link to her video. I will test it to make sure that it works. I hope that it will work. But in her video, she mentioned in her TBR editions that she was going to be picking up an old Harlequin American romance. Harlequin used to have a line of American romances, largely set in Texas. They discontinued it. I think Sarah said they morphed it into a different line. And they don't make American romances anymore as one of their categories. And that reminded me as soon as I saw that, especially since the one American romance that she actually put up on the screen was one that I had read. Considering how many of them there were, that was a shot in the dark. But that immediately made me think of other series that Harlequin has canceled. So for another addition to my TBR will be Michelle Rowan's book Touch and Go from the old Harlequin Blaze line. If the Harlequin American line was largely set in Texas and usually featured the 4th of July or waving flags in the sky, the Harlequin Blaze line featured the aforementioned hanky-panky, only with what Sarah would refer to as a good deal more sizzle. These books were mostly sizzle, which made them all the more enjoyable when the author did something with them. Because you could write one of these things, and if you had a few cliches of dialogue and all the sizzle that your steak can handle, you would have written a Blaze novel. Probably a lot of Harlequin fans would have read it and thought, okay, I think you have your readership confused with someone else. We like these books, but we're not cheap dates. So you're not doing enough in this book. I think a lot of Harlequin fans would do that. And I think that might account for the fact that a lot of the Blaze novels that I've read actually do have some meat on the bone, no pun intended. And in addition to the sizzle. I don't think I've ever read this one, but I'm going to give it a try. And we will see. We will see if it's an example of the former or the latter. And that is it. Those are some additions to my TBR, either for this week or this weekend. I'm not really going to try and claim that these things are going to take me a long time. I mean, they aren't going to take me a long time. I could do an addition to a TBR a lot, several times a week, but you get the point. These are late things that have cropped up on my radar that are definitely going to be read in the next 90 days. So anyway, I'll leave a link to Sarah's video if I can, and I will wrap this up for now, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.